Imagine a world plunged into darkness. A world where the largest city in the nation, New York, is lit by flickering gas jets and the constant deafening clatter of industry, but not by electric light. Then, one man, a self-made wizard, promises to conquer the night. But his promise comes with a dark cost, a system so inefficient it locks the world into a patchwork of local power plants, a system he defends with an astonishing campaign of fear, legal warfare, and public execution. This is the true story of how the very foundation of modern America was forged in the War of the Currents, a brutal, high-stakes battle between a celebrity inventor, his brilliant but marginalized former employee, and an industrial magnate, with the future of electricity and trillions of dollars in wealth hanging on every shocking high-voltage maneuver. The Wizard and the Zenith of Direct Current, D.C. The year is 1882. Thomas Alva Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, stands at the pinnacle of American ingenuity. He is already a legend for the phonograph and the improved telegraph. But his incandescent light bulb, perfected a few years earlier, is his crowning glory, and he's ready to power an entire civilization with it. Edison's vision, realized in the Pearl Street Power Station in Lower Manhattan, was revolutionary. It was the world's first central power generation system built for private customers. The system he employed was DC, direct current. DC electricity, flowing steadily in one direction, worked perfectly with the bulb he invented. It was safe, easy to understand, and it was his, secured by a thicket of interlocking patents that made him the undisputed king of the nascent electrical empire. Edison's empire grew like wildfire. Every city, it seemed, wanted to be Edisonized. But the DC system carried a fatal, invisible flaw. High-voltage DC could not be transmitted efficiently over long distances. It suffered catastrophic power loss. To power a city, a DC generation station had to be placed every square mile or so, requiring massive investment in copper cables, thick, expensive cables, and a decentralized, localized grid. The system was only viable in densely packed urban cores, and even then, it was exorbitantly expensive. The sheer logistics meant that true, national-scale electrification was a pipe dream under the DC banner. Edison, ever the pragmatist and the businessman, simply built more small stations and charged high prices, convinced his proprietary system was the only way forward. He had a monopoly on the modern world, and he would defend it with every resource at his disposal. The culture of the Edison empire was one of relentless work and loyalty, but also of a profound, dismissive arrogance towards outside ideas. Into this ecosystem, in 1884, stepped Nikola Tesla. Tesla was a Serbian-American immigrant, a man whose mind processed the universe in crystalline mathematical terms, a stark contrast to Edison's trial-and-error empiricism. Tesla arrived in New York with a letter of recommendation stating, "My dear Edison, I know two great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Tesla was hired to troubleshoot and redesign Edison's inefficient DC dynamos and generators. He performed brilliantly, solving problem after complex problem. He even claimed that Edison had promised him a payment of $50,000, a colossal sum at the time, easily $1 million in modern terms, if he could substantially improve the DC system. When Tesla completed the work, reportedly beginning to redesign the DC system from the ground up, he asked for the promised compensation. Edison, the story goes, laughed it off, saying, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor."
He offered him a raise of $10 a week instead. Tesla, enraged by the insult and the intellectual dismissal, resigned on the spot. He had not just been working on DC, he had already conceived of a far superior revolutionary system, alternating current, AC. Tesla was soon digging ditches to survive, a brilliant mind reduced to manual labor, but his vision remained uncompromised. DC was a dead end. AC was the future. The great challenger to Edison's DC hegemony was not Tesla, the isolated visionary, but George Westinghouse, a practical, shrewd industrialist from Pittsburgh. Westinghouse had already made a fortune reinventing safety for the railroad with his air brake systems, and now he had his eye on the burgeoning electric market. Westinghouse understood the fatal flaw of DC. He knew that for electricity to power the entire nation, not just Manhattan's financial district, a new efficient transmission system was required. In 1885, his company began experimenting with the European alternating current system, which used transformers to step up the voltage for long-distance transmission and step down the voltage for safe household use. Alternating current was revolutionary because voltage could be manipulated easily. Power could be generated far from the cities, perhaps near a coal mine or a waterfall, transmitted at tremendously high voltages over thin wires with minimal loss, and then safely reduced to a usable level in the neighborhood it served. It was a national grid solution, not a localized patchwork. The problem with the early AC system was the motor. An AC motor capable of running industrial machinery was elusive. This is where the paths of Westinghouse and Tesla converged. In 1888, after struggling to find investors who could look past Edison's celebrity, Tesla finally secured a meeting with Westinghouse. Tesla presented his patents for the polyphase AC induction motor and transmission system. It was the missing piece of the puzzle, a system that was elegant, efficient, and could drive the machines of the Second Industrial Revolution. Westinghouse, immediately recognizing the technological supremacy and business potential, bought Tesla's patents for $60,000, a mix of cash and stock, and a massive royalty agreement of $2.50 for every horsepower of AC electricity sold. Tesla had essentially licensed the core technology that would power the modern world. The battle lines were now drawn. The war of the currents had begun.
On one side, Thomas Edison and his powerful, patented direct current system, the incumbent. On the other, George Westinghouse and the alternating current system, based on the genius of Nikola Tesla, the challenger. The propaganda of fear and the executioner's current. Edison, a man accustomed to having his patents and his will unchallenged, reacted with shock and fury to the rise of Westinghouse AC. He saw his billion-dollar empire, the royalties, the power plants, the sheer intellectual dominance threatened by an upstart technology he dismissed as a fad. His reaction was not to innovate, but to engage in a spectacular, unprecedented propaganda campaign designed to terrify the American public away from AC power. Edison's main line of attack was safety. While AC was indeed transmitted at much higher voltages than DC, it was the only economically viable way to electrify the nation. Edison, however, played on public fear of the unseen force of electricity. He launched a campaign of public disinformation, labeling AC the executioner's current. The most shocking element of this campaign were the animal demonstrations. Edison's employees, often without his direct public involvement, but with his clear backing, staged elaborate, horrifying public electrocutions of stray dogs, cats, and even a circus elephant named Topsy, using Westinghouse's alternating current. The public spectacle was designed to associate Westinghouse with death. The press ate it up, fueling a nationwide hysteria about the dangers of the new technology. The propaganda campaign reached its sickening apex with the introduction of the electric chair. As New York State sought a more humane method of capital punishment than hanging, Edison saw a monstrous opportunity to weaponize AC. He fought against the use of the electric chair in principle, but in practice, he secretly backed the inventor, Harold P. Brown, who used AC technology and generators illegally acquired from Westinghouse to design the chair. Edison and his allies relentlessly lobbied for the chair to be adopted, ensuring it would be powered by the rival system. The first man executed by electrocution was William Kemmler in 1890. The event was not swift or humane. It was a horrifying, prolonged spectacle of torture. Edison's allies had successfully created a new term. To be executed by electricity became known as being Westinghoused. Edison had, in his own twisted way, succeeded in permanently linking AC power to state-sanctioned death. The Chicago Exposition and the turn of the tide. While the War of the Currents raged in the courts and the public square, the financial strain on both companies was immense. Edison's legal teams were tied up in hundreds of patent lawsuits against Westinghouse, a deliberate strategy to bleed the challenger dry. Westinghouse, reeling from the negative publicity and the staggering legal costs, faced bankruptcy. The situation was dire. The pivotal moment arrived with the bid to light the 1893 World Columbian Exposition in Chicago. This was to be a celebration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival. But for Edison and Westinghouse, it was a battle for the future of American industry, a stage for the entire world to witness. Edison's company, now General Electric after a merger, submitted a bid to light the entire fair using DC power for $554,000. Westinghouse, despite his financial weakness, submitted an astonishingly low counterbid of only $399,000 using Tesla's AC system. His secret weapon was the polyphase motor and the sheer efficiency of AC transmission, which required less copper and fewer generators. Westinghouse won the contract. The White City of the Chicago Fair was a triumph. When President Grover Cleveland pressed the button, over 100,000 incandescent bulbs flared to life, illuminating the fairgrounds in a brilliant spectacle the world had never seen. This city of light was entirely powered by Westinghouse AC generators, using Tesla's polyphase system. It was efficient, reliable, and utterly dazzling. The public, the industrialists, and the world witnessed the undeniable superiority of alternating current. The tide had officially turned. The Niagara contract and the final victory. The victory at the Chicago World's Fair provided the necessary momentum for the final, conclusive battle, the contract to harness the power of Niagara Falls. Harnessing Niagara was the ultimate prize, a massive long-term project to generate enough hydroelectric power to light the entire northeastern United States, starting with Buffalo, New York. If successful, it would prove that electricity could be generated miles away from its point of consumption, proving AC's national-scale viability once and for all. Edison's company, now fully merged into the AC-friendly GE, recognized that their internal DC or bust philosophy was now obsolete. But Westinghouse, armed with the success of Chicago and Tesla's engineering, won the contract for the enormous generators. The engineers faced unprecedented challenges, but on November 16, 1996, the switch was thrown. The power from Niagara Falls successfully traveled 22 miles to Buffalo, lighting the city. It was an engineering marvel and a commercial earthquake. The long-distance transmission of massive amounts of power was possible. The future of the American electric grid, a centralized, continent-spanning network, was secured. In the midst of this grueling, years-long war, Westinghouse's finances had been pushed to the absolute brink. Desperate for capital, he was forced to approach Tesla and plead with him to temporarily renounce the paralyzing royalty agreement of $2.50 per horsepower. Tesla, who owed his success to Westinghouse's belief in him and who knew that the future of his AC system was dependent on Westinghouse's survival, made a gesture of astonishing selflessness. He tore up the contract. With that singular act, Tesla forfeited potentially billions of dollars in future royalties, but he ensured that his revolutionary technology would win the war and electrify the world. The legacies of the Titans. The War of the Currents concluded with a clear victor: alternating current. George Westinghouse emerged as the man who commercialized the system that powered modern America, solidifying his company as a primary industrial force. Thomas Edison's legacy remained immense. He was a brilliant inventor, the ultimate industrialist, and a master of public relations. But his stubborn adherence to his own patent and his smear campaign against AC remain a dark footnote in his history. After the war, he shifted his focus away from the power business and onto new projects like the cement industry and moving pictures, never quite regaining his position as the lone king of invention. Nikola Tesla was the undisputed genius of the AC system, the visionary who truly powered the world. Yet his eccentricities, poor business acumen, and the sacrifice of his royalty contract meant that he would spend the rest of his life as a marginal figure, often broke, working on increasingly grandiose and sometimes impractical projects like wireless power transmission from his Wardenclyffe Tower. His true genius was not fully appreciated until decades after his death. The Great American Patent War was more than just a fight between two electrical systems. It was a brutal contest between two contrasting philosophies of American innovation: the localized, protected system of the inventor-businessman, Edison, D.C., versus the open, national, and technologically superior system of the industrial entrepreneur, Westinghouse, A.C. Tesla. The outcome determined not just how homes would be lit, but how factories would run, how cities would be shaped, and how America would ultimately dominate the 20th century as the world's first fully electrified superpower. The alternating current that flows through every American wall socket today is the permanent, humming memorial to the shocking, astonishing, and vital historical true story.
The aftermath of victory and the cost of genius. The lighting of Buffalo by Niagara Falls in 1896 marked the definitive commercial victory of alternating current. George Westinghouse, despite the monumental financial sacrifices, had secured the future of his company, which would grow into a diversified industrial titan. Thomas Edison's electric interests were fully absorbed into the new behemoth, General Electric, or GE, a company that, ironically, quickly moved to refit its power plants and production lines to embrace the AC technology it had once viciously campaigned against. The wizard had lost the war, but his patented light bulb and his creation of the concept of a centralized utility remained fundamental. The $2.50 sacrifice and Tesla's despair. The most poignant and dramatic fallout of the war centered on Nikola Tesla. His decision to tear up the royalty contract with Westinghouse, the one that promised him $2.50 per horsepower generated, was a moment of pure tragic heroism. Tesla's reasoning was complex, driven by an aversion to financial wrangling and a fierce loyalty to Westinghouse, whom he saw as the only man who truly championed his vision. When Westinghouse pleaded with Tesla, revealing that the royalty payments, coupled with the relentless legal attacks from Edison GE, were on the verge of sinking the company and thus destroying the AC system entirely, Tesla did not hesitate. He viewed the successful adoption of his polyphase system as a greater prize than personal wealth. That singular piece of paper, surrendered in a cramped office in Pittsburgh, represented a personal fortune that would have rivaled Andrew Carnegie's or John Rockefeller's, a fortune that some estimate would have been worth tens of billions of dollars today. Tesla emerged from the War of the Currents a celebrated figure in engineering circles, but a poor man. He had proven his system, but his financial foundation was shattered. This sacrifice was the beginning of a cycle of feast and famine that would define the rest of his career. The laboratory of the gods, Tesla's grand visions. Freed from the demands of the current war, Tesla retreated to his laboratory, his brilliant mind exploding with new, even more ambitious concepts. He was no longer interested in lighting cities. He wanted to change the very nature of energy itself. The late 1900s and early 1900s became Tesla's golden age of invention, leading to innovations that stretched the limits of known physics. 1. Radio waves. Though Guglielmo Marconi is often credited with the invention of the radio, it was Tesla who filed the foundational patents and publicly demonstrated wireless communication long before Marconi's transatlantic signal. The Supreme Court later upheld Tesla's priority in the 1940s, but the recognition came too late. Tesla viewed his radio patents as merely a byproduct of his true grand obsession, wireless energy. 2. Remote control and robotics. At Madison Square Garden in 1898, Tesla demonstrated the world's first radio-controlled vessel, a small boat he maneuvered by remote. The astonished audience, unable to fathom wireless technology, believed he was using magic or a trained monkey hidden inside the boat. This was the birth of modern robotics and remote control technology, a concept Tesla envisioned would revolutionize warfare and labor. The descent into the unseen, Colorado Springs. Seeking isolation and the high-voltage conditions necessary for his most radical experiments, Tesla moved to a laboratory in Colorado Springs in 1899. Supported by financier John Jacob Astor IV, Tesla began his quest to transmit electrical power without wires. His laboratory, dominated by a massive high-frequency transformer, was the site of almost surreal electrical phenomena. During his experiments, Tesla routinely generated 12 million-volt sparks, some over 130 feet long, that lit up the nighttime sky and caused local power outages. He claimed to have intercepted cosmic radio signals, which he believed were communications from Mars or Venus. Tesla was operating at the extreme edge of technology, attempting to turn the Earth itself into a giant electric circuit. But the money ran out quickly. His visions were too grand, his promises too far-reaching, and his ability to commercialize non-existent. The failure of Wardenclyffe, the Tower of Dreams. Tesla's final catastrophic failure was Wardenclyffe, a massive custom-built laboratory and transmission tower on Long Island, New York City. Funded initially by the powerful financier J.P. Morgan, this tower was intended to be the first station of a world wireless system, not just for global communication, but for the free, worldwide transmission of electrical energy. Morgan, however, was a capitalist, not a philanthropist. He believed he was investing in a transatlantic communication system to rival Marconi. When he realized Tesla's true goal was the radical, commercially destructive idea of providing energy for free, or at least without the need for traditional meter-reading centralized utility control, Morgan pulled the funding. "Where are you going to put the meter, Mr. Tesla?" Morgan reportedly asked. The question encapsulated the fundamental conflict, the visionary ideal of science versus the commercial reality of the American empire. The Wardenclyffe Tower was never completed. It stood as an eerie skeletal monument to an unfulfilled promise, a stark symbol of the inventor's financial ruin. In 1917, the tower was demolished by its new owners, allegedly out of fear that German spies could use it during World War I. For Tesla, it was the final devastating public humiliation. The corporate consolidation and the enduring legacy. While Tesla faded into obscurity, the industrial legacy of the current war solidified the dominance of GE and Westinghouse. The legal battles between the two rivals did not end with the current war, they simply shifted focus. Recognizing that mutual patent litigation was costly and counterproductive, the two giants quietly agreed to a cross-licensing agreement in 1896. This handshake agreement allowed both companies to use each other's patents, including the vast catalog of Edison and Tesla's inventions, for a fixed fee. This corporate truce effectively created a temporary duopoly, stifling smaller competitors and ensuring that the electrical infrastructure of the United States would be built primarily by these two titans. The agreement, though beneficial to the companies, showed how invention often becomes secondary to corporate control. The War of the Currents, therefore, gave America more than just light. It established the core template of American big business: ruthless competition, followed by tactical corporate consolidation, which ultimately secured control over the essential infrastructure of modern life. Tesla, living in a meager New York hotel room, feeding the pigeons in Bryant Park, and speaking of cosmic rays and the death ray, became the tragic patron saint of the marginalized genius. But every flicker of the fluorescent lights, every hum of an electric motor, and every high-voltage line crossing the American landscape remains an irrefutable testament to the system he sacrificed his fortune to install.